Major General Ramush Haradinai, Professor Dr. Esed Stavoletsi, Dr. Bayram Regepi, and Shirley Kilmendi. They did a wonderful job, and they're going to tell you about that tonight. Thank you. The Albanian American Civic League is delighted to have had this opportunity. We've been talking about this for at least 6 months and maybe longer with Ramush and the others, and finally the day came, and tonight we wanted to give you the account of what happened because of the work that they did before they came here and what they did in Washington. It was magnificent, and you're going to hear it directly from them. And it's not to say that what we did, it's not the past. We laid the foundation on this trip for some extremely important things that if they accomplish what they're going to tell you tonight, along with the plan that we spoke about in Washington and all day today, the hope is that we can have the foundation for the independence of Kosovo, not in 5 years or 10 years, but within a year, because we got to move fast on this, okay? You know, when you look at Ramush, you think about, obviously, the people who fought so hard. The Kosovo Liberation Army, you remember in all the rallies we had, you remember in the rallies that we had, we said that word liberation, how beautiful that word liberation was, while Milosevic was using words like terrorists and separatists and drug dealers. We were in Washington saying, no, these are the freedom fighters. This is the Kosovo Liberation Army. This is the people's army. For 10 years, the Albanian people have suffered under a brutal occupation, and how many years before that, since World War II, all the problems that we know were happening in Kosovo, in the Balkans. But when you look at Ramush, you have to think of the soldiers, think of the ones that died, and when you think of soldiers, don't just think of the ones in uniform, because many Albanians who didn't have uniforms on, innocent civilians, died because they were soldiers too, for freedom. Anybody who lived in Kosovo under that occupation for 10 years, that brutal occupation, for us is a soldier. So why don't we take a moment of silence, let's stand up and bow our heads for a minute to think about all those people who died, and that's what this is all about, to fulfill their dream for freedom and independence of Kosovo. God rest their souls. Thank you. Okay, we're going to make the program very simple. I'm going to spend a short period of time, and I know many of you don't believe that I can be short, but I can be when I want. And I'm going to then have Ramush speak, and then Dr. Stavoletsi, and then Bayram Kilmendi, I guess, would be next, then Dr. Stavoletsi, and then Bayram Jeppy, excuse me. We have to say a little prayer for Bayram Kilmendi and his family, too. I know, thank God. Okay, and then we'll have Shukri, and he'll talk about things like these. Professor Shukri Kilmendi. The idea of this trip, and by the way, Shirley Cloyes, who every step of the way was with us. Thank you, Shirley, for all that you've done. And she will, at the end, give you some insight into some things that we started that have to be completed that she's already working on. Shirley Cloyes, DioGuardi. You know she's my wife. Okay. Okay. Would you believe we met because of the Albanian issue? She was doing a book on Yugoslavia in 1994, and when I heard about this book, we met by accident, and I saw this was a good book, but I saw all these authors in there from Croatia and Bosnia and even the Serb. These were anti-war people that were saying that we're doing the wrong thing, but I said, I don't see an Albanian. She said, well, no Albanian came to me. I said, well, you can't put that book yet, to finish it. We have to find some. So she waited 6 months until we found a way to put the Albanian issue, and that's where we started. Okay. The trip that we took was complicated because so many people did not want this trip to happen. You have no idea the resistance from the State Department, the resistance from members of Congress. I'm going to give you the reality we face, because if we understand what's happening, the dynamics against the Albanian people, not only there in the Balkans, but right here, then we are able to deal with it. We're able to fight the battle the way we can, just like a good soldier, a good general would have it. You know, this is America. And we love America because we're here and we're Americans, even though we have Albanian blood. But it's America, and people elected in America look first to the people in their districts and what their needs are. And in election years like this, not too many people want to hear what's going on in Europe or in Bosnia, especially Bosnia and Kosovo, because they figured, hey, when is Europe going to do its share? So you have a lot of congressmen right now and senators that are pandering to the voters, saying, we're not going to spend much more money. We know we spent $20 billion on the war. Europe spent nothing, practically. So we have to now make sure Europe does the job. So we come in this environment, and the State Department tried every trick in the book to try to get Congressman Gilman to cancel this rally. The first one that we had as the witness was Madeleine Albright, and then she said she couldn't do it. And then after that, we went to Mr. Holbrook, and at the last minute, he was scheduled, then he couldn't do it. So what they were trying to do was wear us down, figuring that Mr. Gilman would then say, okay, if we can't get the right people from the State Department, maybe he will just cancel it. And Shirley and I told Mr. Gilman, we've been through this before. The State Department, we know, is not a friend of Kosovo. It's not a friend of independence for Kosovo. It's a friend of a puppet called Kosovo. If they could make a puppet government in Kosovo, they'd be our best friend, because that's their policy. Their policy today is to take the easy way out and not try to give independence. We are fighting for that independence, and we're using our power in the Congress. And the reason why we succeeded on this trip and will succeed in the future is that the State Department knows that if we have high enough people in the House and the Senate, they're in trouble, because every year they got to get their money from the Congress. So it all comes down ultimately to the power of money, even in America. And with Gilman, and we even saw Senator McCain on this trip, and we'll tell you about that, they now know that they cannot avoid us. And in the middle of this trip, we then get a call from the highest levels of the State Department, Ambassador Pardue, and then they even brought in the special envoy, Mr. Dobbins, and they filled the State Department room up because they heard they were here, and they finally wanted to see them directly and hear from us. In fact, at one point in the meeting, they said, Mr. DioGuardi, would you mind if we met with them alone? He says, not at all. That's what they're here for. So we walked out of the room so they can say whatever secrets they wanted to say to them alone. But that is very important, because you can imagine how nervous now the State Department is when they see this group of important people from Kosovo. These are some of the most important people at the top of Kosovo. When they see them walk in with me, the guy who's been talking against the State Department, against Holbrook, because I know the games they're playing to keep the Albanian people down, not up. They just want to keep them happy, for the moment, not for the long term with independence. Then they get nervous. And you can imagine now all kinds of discussions are going on, because they see that the people have come in with me and Shirley and the League, and our League will not change its position. It's going to be independence, or there's going to be another war. And we don't threaten them that way, but they know from what we say that if you don't do the right thing this time, you have to expect the consequence. Are you prepared to stay there for 30 years and put money, not you, but the United States, to put money here? Look what you did for Bosnia. You made it into an unproductive, ethically divided welfare state, and there's no way out. Do you want to do that in Kosovo? I'm telling you, it's the State Department. Obviously, they say no. Well, that's where you're going unless you give these people independence. And you know what? Not only do they deserve it, they've got the ability to be independent. This was a place that was run just like a country before Milosevic came in illegally. They had everything just like a country. They had control of the resources, the mines. But look what you did now. You closed the mines. They can't get back their jobs. Shukri Kilmendi showed them. Put on the record the statements. You give us a little money, we get the pumps, we take the water out, we put 2,700 Albanians to work, we make a profit this year on the mines. We don't need your money. We need your investment. We don't need your aid. We need your investment. And that's the message we gave them on that side. Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, who had to go, in fact, he's still in Washington, he's going to leave tomorrow, couldn't be here. He laid out the blueprint. He said, this is what was Kosovo before, and here is what Kosovo could be. Give us the investment. We don't need the aid. We don't want to be a welfare state. And then the bottom line, because we had two hearings, very important hearings, one chaired by Congressman Ben Gilman. State Department finally did come down with Ambassador Pardue. I testified. Bayram Regepi testified. Dr. Stavolazzi put his testimony on the record. And we had a wonderful exchange. But me, when I got up there, they said, all right, Congressman DioGuardi, you know, you don't have to read your testimony. I said, well, I wasn't going to read it anyway. I was going to give it to you for the record. Tell us, what do you think is the answer? We always hear that you want independence and everything else. What's the answer? I said, you really want to hear the answer? We brought these three people here to give you the answer. Dr. Stavolazzi is an expert in international law. He knows the case for independence for Kosovo for international law. Just like Noel Malcolm, here's the paper. We brought Dr. Mohammed Mustafa for the economic, practical thing. Give him the resources, and there's an answer there. But let me tell you the tough part of it. It's the political part. And you know what politics is? No easy answer. Do you have the will to do the right thing? President Clinton, we know, finally had the will, dropped the bombs. He did the right thing. We won the war. But now, as Shirley wrote in her great paper, are we winning the peace? It doesn't look like it. What's the real problem? And I looked at these congressmen and I said, let me tell you the problem. The problem is that you cannot solve Kosovo in the context of the United Nations. As long as you have the influence of China and Russia on anything, you cannot solve Kosovo. So, Mr. Clinton, the time again is for you to be bold, like you were last year when you dropped those bombs. You got to now come back in before you leave, take the UN out of this, lead NATO back in, or at least get the United States in front, because Europe's not going to do the job. We see the influence of France, influence of Greece, influence of Russia, working with Serbia. And as long as China and Russia have anything to do with the issue, and we know in the UN they have veto power, this is not going to be resolved. That's the answer. So, Mr. Congressman, are you ready to understand this? Because if you are, and you're ready to work with the investment that these people need, you don't have to worry about Kosovo. It's going to be a strong, independent state. It's looking to the West and the United States. It wants democracy, while Serbia is looking to China and to Russia. And then I reminded them, you know, here's China wants most favored nation status for us. They don't want it now every year. They want it permanently. And guess who gave in the last 6 months $300 million to Milosevic? China. How could we deal with a country when we declare someone a war criminal, and how could we now say that we want to trade, and we got a big trade deficit with China, as you know, they need us. We have to use this leverage. If China wants us to be a trading partner, if they want our most favored nation status, we have the way to hurt them. And yet many congressmen said, what can we do? We're using all the leverage we can. We tried to get Milosevic to release the prisoners. He won't do it. I said, well, you're not doing enough. You gave Russia $4 billion in credits just recently. They're a bankrupt country. Now we're giving all kinds of benefits to China for the trade. You must do something to give them pain on this, and you'll see how fast 7,000 prisoners are released from Mr. Milosevic. So we left them with the tough messages. We now have Gilman working on language on some things that's going to come up soon. But I can tell you a lot. Let me just conclude by saying we had the hearing with Gilman. The next day we had the hearing with Lantos. Gilman came in for 1 hour. We had other congressmen coming in as well. We went to see Jim Trafficant. He spent an hour with us at breakfast. He was nice enough to bring us in so they can see the Congress of the United States opening up in the morning with a prayer, with the Pledge of Allegiance, because I wanted them to be in this room, which is the most incredible room in the world for democracy, the House of Representatives, the People's House. We then, McCain, who was busy, as you can believe, calls me on the mobile phone, says, bring them over. We brought them over. He spent 10 minutes with us talking about what he's going to do on the prisoner issue, and was nice enough to take pictures with them so they can take that back. And we met the State Department, as I said, and Shirley, who did I miss? I know we had Dana Rohrabacher was in there. There was quite a few. But the point is, in 2 days, we did what we had to do to lay a foundation for the work that now has to be done in the next 6 months before President Clinton leaves, so we can accomplish the final step, which is the independence of Kosovo. Thank you. I want Shirley to come up and say a few words because she played such an integral role. Let me tell you, people will stop me and say, well, you know, why didn't we plan a big dinner for these important people? Do you know that we didn't know until the end of last week that the hearing was actually on 1 week's notice? Then we didn't know whether the travel documents would be provided. In fact, 2 people were refused. Can you imagine? They wanted to give them, because they had no passports, they wanted to give them Serbian passports, and those 2 refused to take them, so they didn't come. That was there. But finally, when they got here, and when you deal with the situation of Kosovo, you can't really plan until you know they're on the plane. When they're on the plane, then I know I can start making the calls, making the ads, because otherwise you just don't know. In fact, you should know that 2 of the people that were invited, Gilman sent the letters, and until the last minute they were coming were Archbishop Mark Sopi and Imam Recep Boya. Both of them were planning to be here, to be in Washington. You know, the Serbs like to march around the Archbishop Artembi, and I said it's about time that when we have our hearings, we're going to put the Archbishop and the Imam right there to show that we are a multi-religious state, multicultural, right? And we respect everybody, because the world is trying to paint us as kind of a, what we're not. And I'm not going to get into what they're trying to say who we are, but we know who we are, and we got to make sure the world knows who we are, and we need that kind of public relations. Images are very important in America. So we will have a trip, hopefully shortly, where the Archbishop will come with the Mufti, the Imam, and we'll have a special program with them, and sometime soon in the future, I hope they will come back as well. But imagine the short period of time. Now we have to get the testimony. Some of it came by email to Shirley. Some of it had to be translated by others, and then Shirley would have to still put it in the right English. Most of it came with them personally. So Monday, we had this 1 day just to work with them to make sure that the words that they had were not only powerful in their mouths, but were the right way to be expressed on the paper in English. And Shirley, you know, was doing that all day. In fact, she went to bed 2 o'clock in the morning the day we had to go down, and 5:30 in the morning, only with a few hours sleep, we get a call from Zurich, and it's the Major General Ramush Haradinaj saying, I'm here, so I'm coming. Until that call, I didn't know he was coming. So this is the world this is what we have to face, but we did it, and we're so happy that they did come. But now I want to pay special tribute to my wife Shirley, because she works very hard. Let's give her a big hand.
I promise not to speak very long. You get plenty of chances to hear from me and not from the people that are with us today. But I want to start with some thank yous. And an important event of this kind does not happen without a lot of sacrifices, a lot of work on the part of many people, a lot of fundraising, etc. And I first want to thank all the members of the board of the Albanian American Civic League who are with us tonight. And I'd like to give them a round of applause, everybody. Please do. And I want you to know that a lot of people who contributed to this from the board are not here. Some of the people from Patterson chapter are here tonight. I believe some of the people from Waterbury are here, but people from Anchorage, Alaska, and people from Florida, in Miami, and people from Dallas, and people from Chicago, all around the country contributed to making this possible. I also want to thank the Mitrovica Association, who played a major role in organizing this event, funding this event. I particularly want to thank Cevdet Canusi and Brahim Saiti for all of the work that they did in organizing everyone who lives in America from Mitrovica. Thank you very, very much. I also want to thank all of you for coming, and above all, I want to thank our guests for whom Joe and I have the greatest respect and admiration. Respect and admiration for the sacrifices they've made on behalf of Kosovo and the Albanian national cause, and for the enormous intelligence, integrity, and vision that they are bringing every day now to the future of Kosovo. They give me enormous hope and inspiration, and I know you've all experienced that tonight. And I just want to say a little bit about how all of this happened. When we were in Kosovo, we were at basically the guests of General Ramesh Haradinaj for Flag Day, and we were with an official delegation of our board, and we were at the rededication of the League of Prizren, and we were able to experience the incredible euphoria of being in free Kosovo on Flag Day. But at the same time, and I should, by the way, add, there were many, many celebrations all over the country, and they represented all of the best that Kosovar Albanians had to offer. It was an enormous privilege to be there. But it was devastating also to go to Pristina and around the countryside and see the failures of the UN administration and of NATO. You know, everyone had emerged from this horrible war, and there wasn't enough heat, and there wasn't enough electricity and hot water, and there was no telecommunication system, and some people didn't have enough food, and you had all of these intellectuals with no jobs, and you had plenty of people with no jobs, but it's particularly demeaning when you have very skilled people who find it easier to be, you know, a taxi driver or an interpreter, and they were not being brought into the creation of Kosovo. And I was so angry, and we came back and we wrote a report to Gilman, Congressman Gilman. I said, this is an absolute scandal, and we have to turn it around. And so what we decided to do, we said, look, you have to have a hearing on Kosovo. You have to change the way the UN is operating. If you don't do it, we know the U.S. is going to pull out. And we will not accept it if you only bring people from the State Department, from these international organizations. You don't need to hear from them. What you need to hear from are leading Kosovars, people who are on the ground doing the work every day, who know what the problems are and can identify the solutions. And that's how this began. And as Joe pointed out, there were so many blocks to bringing this about because the Clinton administration, they don't want to talk about Kosovo, and they don't want to talk about problems during the Gore campaign for presidency. They want it quiet. And this is an enormous mistake. And frankly, we have, to thank my husband, Joe DioGuardi, because as a former congressman, he has access that very few people have to the highest levels of government. And together with members of the board, we are able to press. And of course, we know that someone like Congressman Gilman is with us. But it took an enormous effort to go ahead and get this. And it turned out to be prophetic, and this is the last thing I want to conclude with. What have we seen since we've gotten back from Kosovo in December? We have seen, and I'm sure you have, one horrible anti-Albanian article after another in the U.S. media. All they're talking about practically is about the Kosovar reprisal killings of Serbs. They're not talking about this incredible project of rebuilding Kosovo. They're not talking about the truth of the Albanian world. They're not talking about that Slobodan Milosevic is there and trying to destabilize, Mitrovica and Jalan and the whole country, and he wants to invade Montenegro and he wants to come back. They're not talking about what's really going on. And there's that. And then we had this horrible legislation, about the Kasich Amendment to try to block the money that will go in the form of the supplemental bill to Kosovo. And now we have another resolution out there that's going to try to cap the amount of money. Meanwhile, right before our delegation came, Congressman Gilman introduced a very different resolution calling for lasting peace, justice, and stability in Kosovo. Everyone in this delegation heard the members of Congress speak who do not want to continue working in Kosovo. And I want to say to you, all of you and everyone who's in the diaspora, please, please, please don't take the independence of Kosovo for granted. Ever since I've gotten back, people say, oh, don't worry, we're going to be independent. It's not a problem. The Americans have built Camp Bond Steel there. You don't have to worry about a thing. That is wrong. We saw it in Congress, and the good people, and there are some good people in the State Department, said, look, we're in trouble. The supplemental bill for $90 million we can't rebuild Trepčka if we don't get that money. Okay? So we have from now, it's actually going to start in May, to August. The new war is now in Washington, and we hope all of you are going to join us in making it a success and winning that war. Thank you.
And I wanted to remind you how we started this mission, because we said multi-religious. We started, and it was a coincidence, Albanian state, not a multi-ethnic state. And that's what we got to keep saying before people start to believe that all of a sudden we've got something here that has to be shared. It's over 95% Albanian. Who knows? Could be 98% right now.